Guys, gals, and pals, welcome back to Paint and Talk episode 15. As always, I hope you have won the lottery since the last time I've seen you. I myself, just before hitting this record button, had something of a paint catastrophe, if you will. I got paint everywhere, like all over. It might be on my face right now. There very well could be paint on my chin right now, or nose, anywhere really. It's all over my hands. Luckily though, not on the floor or the cube, if you will. So it looks like we've avoided disaster, but catastrophe still did happen. Today, I want to talk about something that one of those topics that I've really wanted to talk about since the day I started Paint and Talk. Like, it was one of the things that, when imagining this series, I imagined myself speaking on. Because it's something I think is like personal but universal, and that's like religion, spirituality. And I'm not going to talk about my thoughts on like mass religion. Like, I don't want to talk about this isn't going to be a thought piece about religion. You know what I mean? I don't want to do that because I think religion's so interesting because it's something that's, especially I feel like in my lifetime, I've seen it go from very universal to very personal, I don't think that 30 years ago you would have a discussion with someone, which I don't know because I wasn't around, nor having religious discussions in the 80s. But like, I don't think it was the type of thing where you'd really go up to someone and be like, what do you think about God? And it would turn into a philosophical discussion. You know what I mean? I think it was more, I'm a Protestant, and then you knew their beliefs kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like, I'm Hindu, I'm a Muslim, like these things. Now it's turned into such a personal thing, and I think it's this generation, personally, that's really done that. And I think, like, I know myself personally, I've definitely had a journey of sorts with it, you know what I mean? I have friends who grew up super religious, then they sort of kind of fell out of it a little bit, they got a little, disenfranchised, is that the word? They got a little disenfranchised with it, and then they came back to it later in their own way. You know what I mean? It's such a personal thing now, and I think that's why it's really, I don't want to get too grandiose in the first 5 minutes of this Paint and Talk, but I do think it's kind of beautiful in a way how it is these days, where everyone can really have their own thing going, and none of it is. And I mean, in large part, it's very respected. It's almost a true freedom of religion that's occurring. I think also as things get more complicated in the world, people are looking towards religion, and that's really cool too. So I want to talk about my own personal beliefs and do it from kind of a neutral perspective, I guess. I think all of us have our own things we like and dislike about larger religion on scale, but I don't know. I don't think I'm qualified to speak on that. You know what I mean? I don't think I'm the guy to really get into that. But I can speak on my own beliefs, which is sort of, I guess, the technical term or whatever would be agnostic. You know what I mean? I don't have a real denomination. I think I've been to inside a church once in my life. So I wouldn't say I was really raised religious at all, but I've come out for a while. I'd say if I'm to go on just track how my beliefs were. As a kid, I always wanted to go to church. Actually, I always thought it was really cool because all my friends in elementary school were in communion and stuff. They'd get their communion and they'd be going to these ceremonies where they could eat food, and my chubby little kid self was like, oh my god, Mom, Dad, why can't I do that? And I don't know why I wasn't raised religious. I'm not going to try and speculate on it, you know what I mean? But for one reason or another, it was never really a thing, So I really wanted to do it. I was super interested in it. I'd watch YouTube videos on all the religions, Hinduism, all these things. It's a goal of mine in my lifetime, maybe sooner rather than later, to read all the religious texts, because it's something I'm super interested in. And I think that's where it started. That's where my interest in it started, because I was just I don't know why I was so drawn to it. I think it was really just that surface level of like, my friends are doing it, it's probably really cool. Um, and a lot of those same friends, it's interesting, ended up kind of growing up and really hating it, being like, I hate that I was raised that way, all these things. And that's kind of given me a gratitude towards not being raised that way. Not like, I don't know, I guess I can't say I'm grateful because I don't know how it would have turned out if I was raised that way. But I think it's also very nice that I got the chance to develop my own beliefs, and not have to, like a lot of those people, I guess you could say I had a lot of less steps than a lot of people. And I'd love to, like, on a very serious note, I'd usually do jokes for, like, the call to action in these episodes. Hear, like, what your guys' experience with this was, too. Because, again, it's just such a personal thing. I've never heard two of the same story. I've heard similar stories, but never two of the same. But back on track here. A lot of my friends, they had extra steps almost. They had to fall out of their organized religion before falling back into their own personal religion. And from what I've seen, and again, I don't want to like do too many blanket statements here because it is something I'm not the most qualified in. But from what I've seen, like, it seems like these people who are very spiritual, myself included, are at their best when it is a very personal thing. You know what I mean? And personal can be like, I personally decided to start going to church every day. That's cool too. But personal more so in like just willed by yourself. I think if you try and force a belief onto someone, it usually doesn't work out. I think there's history that's proven that for sure. But also just like, I think anecdotally we can all relate to that, whether you know someone or it's you yourself. But so I was really interested as a kid. And then I'd say around like 10 was when I really started to develop more like thoughts about it outside of like, oh, I wish I would do that. Maybe it was a little later. Maybe it was like 12. And I was like, I started becoming like a big atheist. You know what I mean? Which I feel like, I don't know. I feel like everyone who's raised not religious goes through that because it is, I don't want to call it a pipeline, but it's an easy conclusion to come to when you're looking at like history and you're looking at all the wars that were started in these things. And you're like, oh, this religion thing must be bad. You know what I mean? I think it's a really easy way to go with that a lot of people end up going. And I was definitely one of those people. And I still don't believe in, I wouldn't say I'm like a monotheist or someone who's like, there is a God and he's making everything happening. Like, I don't think that there's one guy who's pulling the strings behind all this. That concept, maybe I just haven't gotten there yet, like on my own personal level, but that concept doesn't mend well in my head. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't say I'm there exactly, but I definitely still hold some of the beliefs of like looking around at all these things happening and kind of being a little disenfranchised with the organized religion on a personal level because of that. Again, I'm not doing anything. I'm just saying on my own personal level, I'm not too into it for that reason, I'd say. And that's why I never got into it. Because of all these things, and then I'd say around like up till like 16, I was definitely still an atheist. I remember that. I'd say around like late teens is when I started to kind of be like, not so much that I had a held spiritual belief, but two big things happened. One, I just kind of became more okay with saying, I don't know. I think when you're a teenager, you're a lot more stubborn than you are when you're a little older, even in your late teens. That's a really like the coldest take ever, but I would say that's fairly true, is that like you're your most stubborn when you're like 15, I feel like. I know I was. So like around 16, when I started realizing like, oh, I didn't have everything figured out last year like I thought I did at 15, is when I was like starting to open myself up more to like saying I don't know about things, and that's definitely a trait I still have to this day, where I'm very much like I won't give these big statements on things. I'm sure you guys have noticed, because you've unfortunately been subjected to watching footage of me, that like I preface everything with like 10, I don't know, in my opinion, I just think. Like, I think that comes from almost me having that like realization when I was in my later teens of like, man, like I really know so little, you know what I mean? See, I just did it. And it was around that time that just out of that very like normal like process of realizing how little I knew, that's when I kind of opened myself up, not to like being an agnostic, but just being like, I'm unlabeled. Like I don't know, I don't have anything. I know agnostic's more so a fancy way of saying I don't know, but I'm pretty sure, and this is again where I don't want to speak to try and give any hot takes here, just talking about myself personally, because I don't know if agnostic means I don't know, or I don't know but I believe in a higher power. I think it's the latter. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the latter. I think it's saying I don't know, but I think there's some degree of a higher power. And that's when I kind of open myself up, not to saying I think there's a higher power, to saying like, I don't know, you know? Something I would annoyingly probably say to a lot of people at the time was like, I can't even figure out, this math problem. How am I supposed to figure out if there's a God? I still believe that, to be honest. Like, I'm still like I'm barely able to get the line straight on this painting that I'm trying to do. Like, you think I'm gonna know if there's a God? Like, that doesn't make sense. And I didn't really have, this was definitely an immaturity thing, but I didn't have this personal view of religion. I was like, religion, I was still thinking of it in the very conventional sense of like, you're either a Christian, or you're a Buddhist, or you're a Muslim, or you're a Jewish person, like all these things. And like, I never really was exposed to the idea of like, oh, you can just do your own thing. Like, you can have your own belief. You don't need to be, or you can have a belief that's closer to, a certain religion, but you don't have to like abide by that. You know what I mean? You don't have to call yourself, you can believe in the stories of the Bible without calling yourself a Christian. Like, you can do all these things. I didn't realize that yet because I was just, quite frankly, I think I was just too immature. And, I think me be willing to say I don't know, mixed with me really getting into Buddhism too. That was probably the biggest part of this that really did affect me. Because Buddhism's so interesting. Buddhism's a religion, for sure, like it is, but it's different from a lot of other religions. If you're familiar with it, you'll know exactly what I'm saying, in that Buddhism's kind of a philosophy, and funny enough, and this is the worst thing in the world to admit, what got me into Buddhism was The Buddha by Osamu Tezuka. It's a series by him. He's my favorite manga artist, maybe one of my favorite artists ever, to be honest. And he has this series that's telling the story of the Buddha from a very like Disneyfied perspective, almost like it's cartoony. I would highly recommend it. Honestly, I know it's a Disneyfied version. Disneyfied. You know what I mean? It's a Disney-esque version of the story of Prince Siddhartha, but it's a great jumping off point just to understand like how things really went. Because again, I'm growing up here in New York. I'm like fully in the Western world. I'm not coming at these things with the perspective of like having any sort of, I met one Buddhist in my whole life. And we weren't close enough where I ever asked him about being a Buddhist. I did, now that I think about it. I asked him if I could go to a temple with him every time I saw him. But like, I never really had a deep convo about it. I was just like, can I get into it, because I was interested. But, having if you can't tell, I'm trying to do really thick lines on this. I think on camera this might just fully show up as black. But I'm doing this is why we gotta throw on the Instagram more, because you can't see these lines, I don't think. Or maybe you can and I sound insane right now. Either way, this is awesome. But I think that's when that's what made me get into it, was seeing the story of it from the Buddha, because I never was exposed to it before. I didn't realize how, I realized Buddhism was a religion, and I'd heard people say to me anecdotally, like, Buddhism's more of a philosophy. And, I just don't think I had the cognitive ability to understand, like, what that really entailed. Because it's so true, Buddhism is more of a philosophy than a religion. There are spiritual elements to it, but it's not so much, there's no God in Buddhism that you're praying to. And as a kid, I had the idea, we would see the big fat Buddha, and I was like, which is actually, I think the Chinese version of Buddha, Budai. I'm pretty sure. Maybe, I don't know, don't quote me, ever, on anything. But I always, as a kid, was like, oh, this is the guy they pray to. Like, this is the Buddha. And little did I realize, like, I'm sure some people do. I know there are so many different types of it. But, like, that's not what Buddhism is. Buddha is not your God. You're not, like, doing that. It's a philosophical thing. It really is. And getting into that made me So like I think it was the mix of within this 1 year where I started being more open to saying like, I don't know, I don't really know what's going on, and getting into Buddhism and realizing like, oh, this thing that I really was against before, any sort of like mass religion where I joined something, this thing was like has elements to it that can be good. You know what I mean? I know there are people who view the Bible only from the lens of metaphors. Like they love the Bible, they call themselves a Christian, but they don't follow every rule because they will go to the stories of the Bible for their own morality. It's just metaphors, nothing else. And like that's what really opened my mind to like, oh, yes, I might not love the idea of like calling myself something and marrying that, but there's very much still a way where I could do both. I could do something without marrying it, and that I think was the biggest realization I needed of all. Okay, I got some black on that. Let's see if I can just cake it on more. Kind of worked. Actually, I think that worked mostly. And that's what I really needed to realize, that I could make things what I wanted to make them. Like I could say, and that's where I think the journey kind of almost concludes. There's more to it, but that's where it almost concludes. That like I was like, that's what I'm closest to now. I'd say I'm closest to being a Buddhist. I wouldn't call myself a Buddhist, but I'd say my beliefs are closest to that of Buddhism. My friend from who he visited China recently to visit his family, he got me a charm that had like ashes from the fig tree where the Buddha was enlightened under. I have no idea if it was real. He says it is, so I would think it is, because he's not a tourist, so he wouldn't fall into the tourist traps. But I don't know 100%. Like I have that above where I like pray and stuff like that. I'd say that's like the closest thing I have to spirituality. I read a lot of Buddhist stuff still. So again, like, would I call myself a Buddhist? No. But if you made me call myself something, I would. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I don't know if this is a metaphor that'll make sense to a lot of people, but I know like a lot of friends I have in the like queer spaces will say like, I'm not like gay unless you make myself call me that. You know what I mean? Like I just do what I want. I don't see it as a thing that I have to label. But if you need a label to understand it, that's what I'd say. I'm gay, right? That's a lot of friends I have will say that. I'd say it's the same with me in religion, where like I wouldn't say I have a label. I just do what I feel. Like I have my own practice. But if you like beg me for a label, I'd say I'm somewhere in the Buddhist realm, which could be inaccurate even. I don't know, because I've asked friends. That one friend, I did ask him how I could convert, and he said you just gotta like do it. You just like say like you could just be a Buddhist. I don't know what where he fell into. I know he's from Vietnam, so maybe that influenced like the type of Buddhism he was into. I don't know. Either way, you know what I mean. I never was too. I never married anything, but I still would say I'm closest to that. And what really pushed me, this is the conclusion to the story of my sort of like my journey here, was like one time I was really going through something, and it was, I feel so like, I don't know, I feel like very almost cringy telling this story because it's such a, I don't think I've ever gotten this personal in a Paint and Talk before. But I was going through something really bad, and I prayed for the first time in my life. Maybe like second, but it was this was probably about a year ago. I was like, let me just pray. You know what I mean? I don't know why. I think maybe it was just finally like the straw that broke the camel's back of like, I'd gone through enough development and me willing to open my mind to this stuff and me saying, I don't know, to all these things, that I was like, maybe let's just try it, And I did, and my situation got better literally within 20 minutes. And like, I think I always, when I was an atheist, would like hear stories like that and be like, that's total BS. Like your mind's just making things up. And now that I'm telling one, it's crazy that I'm here. I will say, as I tell my own story, totally could be true. My mind could be making things up. And then, I think after that though, because obviously that happens, and right away I'm just kind of in a state of like, oh wow, like maybe I've had this wrong my whole life. You know what I mean? Like it was definitely one of those moments. And like I was sitting and thinking, and I was like, You know, because I think, and this is like just a huge thing for that guys do, I think, where like it's like I got to make this logical. You know what I mean? I wasn't quite as open yet to like letting things be what they want to be. I was like, this has to fit into a box somehow. And I think what I kind of concluded, like trying to sit down and really think about it logically, like let's say this is complete coincidence. Like nothing happened. It was gonna get better whether I prayed or not. I was like, realistically though, let's say it's not a coincidence. Like if it's a coincidence, great. The coincidences will keep happening. Let's say it's not a coincidence though. How much does it hurt to pray? Like how much if I pray every day for 3 minutes, whatever it makes the most sense. A couple minutes a day if I'm praying. What does that hurt? You know what I mean? Like what am I missing out on by doing that? If it's doing nothing, if it is just, all coincidence and nothing's happening, sure, like that's fine. You know what I mean? Those coincidences will still happen. If it's not though, there's those coincidences won't happen. You know what I mean? Like if there is a spiritual element to this, then like it takes 3 minutes a day to invest in that and make sure that that's there. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, I still would say I'm not, like if you're trying to get into like my specific beliefs on a personal level, I wouldn't say I'm exactly, I don't believe in a God. I think it's more of a spiritual kind of thing of like, I believe in almost like an energy, you know what I mean? And this is so spiritual miracle kind of like astrology stuff, I feel like at this point. But that's where I'd place myself. I'd say I believe in more of an energy to things, and this is where, like, to me, right, I kind of believe in fate. I go back and forth on it a lot, if fate's real. But I kind of believe in it. And to me, like, if fate is real, it exists in random circumstance, right? Because how else, if I, just go do drugs every day and live on the streets, right? But my fate is to be a millionaire. The random circumstance that makes that happen is what would guide me there, right? If, kind of separating self-determination from free will in this scenario. Like you're saying you have the right to self-determine, but you will end up in a place, then the random circumstance are what would make that happen. Let's say it's, my fate for my worst video ever to get 1 million views. The random circumstance of 1 million different people feeling like, oh, let's just see, or like, I have nothing else to watch, let's click on this one. You know what I mean? Let's say it's the random circumstance of everyone gets a red thumbnail on their homepage and mine's the only green one, so they click it, right? Things like this that are like, random is where that fate would occur. And that's where I believe like in spirituality is like in these random circumstances that end up really like helping you is almost, I feel like, where you can see it more so. And that's what I mean when I say like, it could be a coincidence, yes, but what if it's not? That's like, I think that's where I mean that most of all, is like, totally it could be a coincidence that this does well. But like, I don't think it's a coincidence that, so many people after years and years of working hard get lucky randomly. You know what I mean? Like there are places where you can see these things and it doesn't feel random enough where I'm comfortable calling it random. And that's where I kind of started going off into my own little like realm of spirituality. I wouldn't say it's, I guess it's Buddhist in the idea that it believes in more of an energy than a god for sure. And going back to, oh my god, I don't remember the episode of Paint&Talk that it was. I think I painted something horrible in it too. One of the Paint&Talks, I talked about how honesty really changed my life and my perspective on everything. And that is also somewhat spiritual for me. I'd say it's not 100%, but like there's definitely a spiritual aspect to that like that's where I believe it does its work. You know what I mean? And that's really where I'd say my beliefs lie now, is like in kind of an energy, kind of an honesty, random coincidence. I think there's almost a grand design because of that. Because sometimes, to put it in the simplest terms possible, sometimes it just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's like things work out, and I think we can all relate to this in our own lives. Let me know if you guys have something like this. Like, we all have circumstances, everyone I've talked to at least does, where it's like, that shouldn't have worked. Like that, there in every single, logical like conclusion, that shouldn't have happened. But the one thing happened where it worked out. And of course then you gotta ask like what if it wasn't? What if for every person who it worked out for, there are a million who it didn't? Very reasonable, right? But that goes back to, again, kind of like almost the bet of like, how much does it cost you though? Like, what if it's not? And then what's the price of that, And that's where I think, so there's this thing called Pascal's wager. I'm sure you're all familiar. It's super known. It's basically like if heaven and hell do exist, it's a lot smarter to be religious because what you're wagering, it's like, it's better just to follow the rules of, he was doing it in a Western tradition, so he was like, better to follow the rules of Christianity than risk going to hell just in case it is real, right? I don't like that because I think following the rules, like if it's not real, you are giving up a lot in your life. That's why I'm not a huge fan of it. I also just wouldn't say I believe in an afterlife that literally, so again, like that's why I'm not the biggest fan of that idea. But I think if you remove that idea from Christianity of like there is an energy, there is some being, there is some higher power that will help you, that will make your life better, why not? How much does it cost to, put your life into some sort of belief, And for me, I know, like, I don't have, like, this is my own personal spirituality. I don't, restrict myself with any sort of nominal rules. I don't not eat meat on Fridays or anything like that. All these things are very, I do what I want still. It's not like I restrict myself with any sort of rules, but I just believe in this thing. And I genuinely do think it's definitely like made my life better since, I think being someone who's into art and stuff has also shaped this for sure, because, as an artist, I think that there is, like, it's almost inherently a spiritual action to make art, because you're just kind of like making something out of thin air that you just thought up, right? And like, you don't know where that came from most of the time. I mean, sometimes you'll get a picture and you're like, I want to paint that, of course. But like, for a lot of the time, like, ideas just kind of come to you, and it's like, it's interesting. There's got to be, like, you almost feel like there's something else there for sure. And that's why I would say, like, as the more I got older and like allowed myself, because for a while I was like, there's no way I'm ever gonna do anything artsy in my life. I was kind of like, I still loved it and I was still always doing it, but like in my head I wasn't. Does that make sense? Like, I was almost in denial about the fact that like I was like a very artsy person, I'm super artsy fartsy, and I was kind of in denial of that. I was like, I want to be more normal kind of thing, I was like, artists are weird and like I should just listen to the art, not make it, maybe self-doubt, whatever. We can unpack that another time. That's a whole other can of worms, I guess. But like, I think as the deeper I got into like realizing like, oh, like I'm very into this art stuff, the more open I got to the idea of like man, maybe there is something, and I think like, as far as like everything else, my own beliefs, I would say reincarnation makes more sense to me than afterlife, but I also think it does make some sense if there's nothing after. And outside of that, I'm just a big believer in like energy and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So I hope this was bearable, you know what I mean? I think when people talk about their spiritual beliefs, oftentimes it's very, I don't know, it almost comes off as like inherently self-aggrandizing of like, I believe this thing and I've invented my own thing. What I believe is basically just Buddhism with less rules, to be honest. Like, that's kind of what it boils down to. So I'm not trying to sound like I'm, self-aggrandizing or I've discovered some huge thing. I don't know. I feel like this is a conclusion I've come to. Let me know if you guys have anything similar to this, so I don't feel quite as insane saying all this. Because, I don't know. I think like it comes off a certain way whenever I have conversations with people about this. I get annoyed personally at a lot of this stuff because I don't know why. There's something about it that's almost like you don't really want to touch it in the same way that you like to touch a conversation like morality, maybe, maybe just because of the history there. Like, religion's such a hefty word in comparison to belief, and I wouldn't say I'm religious. I'd say I have beliefs. It's like that line in Weezer, the greatest Weezer song ever, Feels Like Summer, where he goes, I'm spiritual, not religious. That line changed my life, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why that came to my mind. It's a terrible song by the best band ever. But anyways, guys, you know the drill. This is the painting with my extremely blue hands here. Go over to the Instagram to check it out. I think it came out pretty cool. Obviously, it's about religion. Go check out the explanation over there. It'll be up like 12 hours after this. So until then, guys, when I see you tomorrow, what should you... Oh, actually, I want to do something serious today. Just comment, like, if you have beliefs, if you have a journey. I'd love to hear it. I'm going to respond to these. Like, 100%, these are getting responded to. I'm going to make sure. So please, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And, yeah, until then, I will see you guys tomorrow.